I'd like to welcome everyone to the public meeting of the Saskatchewan Rate Review Panel. I would like to acknowledge that we are meeting in Treaty 6 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis. We pay our respects to the First Nations and the Métis ancestors of this place and reaffirm our relationship with one another. My name is Albert Johnston. I'm the chair of the Saskatchewan Rate Review Panel. The panel consists of 7 members from across Saskatchewan, and most of them are actually here today. Before we start, I'll outline the format of the meeting. First, there will be a presentation from SaskEnergy, who I will introduce in a moment. Following the presentation, there will be an opportunity for questions from the floor and from those who are viewing online. Please note that the proceedings are being recorded and will be posted on the panel's website after we're finished. With that, I will turn it over to Marc Guillet. Marc is the CEO and president of SaskEnergy, and I would ask Marc to come forward, and he can then introduce the other members of his team that will be taking part in the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Normally when we start a public meeting in that, we'll do a land acknowledgement, and the chair has given the land acknowledgement. We also do a safety moment, and then I'll go into the agenda and introduce the officials that are here with me today. The safety moment that I'm going to share today is, as we look outside, the weather is starting to change on us, and so I thought I would look at Environment Canada has some safety moments, and one of the ones they have is dealing with lightning safety and the preparedness for lightning safety. Kind of some interesting statistics that they've got on that, and basically they say that every year in Canada, lightning can cause as many as 10 deaths and 164 injuries. I didn't realize it was that significant. And they provide a caution basically saying if you can hear thunder, you can get hit by lightning, so they say take shelter immediately, and if you cannot find a sturdy, fully enclosed building, go into a metal-roofed vehicle. And they say stay inside for at least 30 minutes until the last that you heard of thunder, because there's still potential for being hit by lightning. And they say that direct strikes are responsible for only about 5% of lightning-related deaths and injuries. And they say 2 other hazardous phenomena that happen by lightning is ground current, and they call it side or a splash account for about 60 to 80% of lightning-related injuries. And they say a ground current is set up when lightning hits the ground, spreads out, and can go through a victim. So to take caution when you're hearing thunder, that even after that, lightning is still potentially a possibility. So that's the safety moment I was going to do today. So the officials I have with us here today, I've got Corey Fry, who is our acting Executive Vice President for Corporate Planning, and also have Jason Shell, who's our Director of Policies, Strategies, and Rates. And today is the agenda that we're going to have is going to go through a little bit of a background. I'll start off with a little bit of background information on how we're here today and what our application is about. And then I'll bring forward what our recommendation is before the panel. And then I'll turn it over to Corey Fry, who will talk about the details of our delivery service rate application, the financial update that we are bringing forward to the panel for consideration. And then I'll deal with Jason will take over the commodity application and talk a little bit about bill impact. So just some of the background that I want to cover off is talk a little bit about SaskEnergy itself, and there's basically on the customer profile as indicated in the slide presentation, there's 4 main customer groups, and the 4 customer groups that we have is the residential customer. That's our largest category, and that includes our urban and rural customers, and that's about 365,000 customers. And out of our total customer base that we have is 408,000 customers. The residential classification is basically anyone that is using up to that 10,000 cubic meters of gas. And if you're over that 10,000 cubic meters, you go into that next classification, which is that commercial small class. It's about 41,800 customers. And that's your main street type businesses that has, the small hospitals, the restaurants and curling rinks. And they use up to that 100,000 cubic meters. And if you go over the 100,000 cubic meters of gas, then you move into the commercial large customer base, and that's about 1,500 customers. And that's your warehouses and your buildings and larger buildings and things like that. And hotels would be into that classification. And to stay in that classification, it's gas that's used between 100,000 cubic meters and 660,000 cubic meters. And if you go over that 660,000 cubic meters, then you move into that small industrial class, which right now we have 26 customers in that. And that includes, the large hospitals that we have in the province, and also any of those manufacturing businesses that go into there. So SaskEnergy itself has about 72,000 kilometers of pipe that serves our customer base. So this, it's a little bit difficult to see on the screen here, but basically what we wanted to talk a little about is just to show about natural gas distribution in Canada and the various jurisdictions that have distribution companies. And kind of what pops out, or should be popping out on this one, is when you look at Saskatchewan, just the size and the area that we cover off on providing distribution compared to some of the other provinces and other utilities bases. We have 408,000 customers about that we have, and we have got the exclusive jurisdiction for serving these customers in Saskatchewan. That's located over 380,000 kilometers across Saskatchewan. So it's a very extensive, as I said, those 72,000 kilometers of pipe. And when you look at the community base that we serve about 93% of the communities in Saskatchewan. So it's a very extensive pipe base. And I'd like you to keep that in mind when we start talking and Corey starts talking about some of the comparators and some of where our costs are coming from. And, just for comparison purposes, if you were to look at to Alberta next door, ATCO, where we've got 408,000 customers, they've got about 1.25 million customers, and they've got about 40,000 kilometers of pipe. So really, they've got like 3 times the number of customers that we have, but and they've only got about half, a little over than half of the amount of kilometers of pipe that we have. And then when you look to someone like Enbridge, it's that red piece over in Ontario, that's a whole different scale. Again, we're looking at, with them, they've got about 2.1 million customers, and they have about 40,000 kilometer pipe. So again, that's about 5 times the customer base that SaskEnergy has, and they slightly more than about half, again, the amount of pipe we have. So those are important to keep in mind when Corey starts going through the details and when we're trying to do that comparison about how our rates are compared to other jurisdictions and what drives costs and that. So it's just trying to look at. So when you're looking at that customer density, the average customer density across Canada is about 6 customers per kilometer of pipe, and so the industry average is about 30 customers per kilometer of pipe. So there's a little bit of difference on that. So just wanted to cover that off. When we look at SaskEnergy and the services that we provide, this graph here, or this slide here, kind of shows there's really 2 sets of services we have, and we're before you here today and trying to bring information to the panel. We have both the commodity, which is the natural gas that is purchased, and then we purchase those gas from producers or from marketers, and then we transport it into the province or across the province through high pressure transmission. So that's the commodity side. The other side of the slide talks about our delivery service, which we're also here before the panel today on dealing with delivery service. So I had mentioned the number of customers, but basically when that gas comes across high pressure transmission, goes to what's called in the middle there, that town border station. The town border station is where pressure is reduced to low pressure. That's where the SaskEnergy distribution service starts, is from that point, and then it's a pipe that we had talked about earlier, delivering it to the homes and the hospitals and the other customer base. So this is basically the business on what we call the local distribution company, the SaskEnergy side, and those are the 2 areas that are covered off on that. The other piece I wanted to talk about is the bill that customers receive from SaskEnergy. There's 2 main components to the bill. The components are the commodity and delivery service, which I had talked about earlier. So the commodity rate itself, that piece is, there's no franchise. SaskEnergy doesn't have a franchise over commodity. So there's other third-party retailers that can sell within Saskatchewan. That's a competitive base, and third parties can sell gas to customers. And the other important piece on the commodity side is that the gas consumption charge that we have on that That represents the cost of gas that we actually purchase. SaskEnergy does not make any margin or profit on the commodity itself. So it's a competitive business, and we make no profit or any margin on it. How we do is we track the costs, and those costs are tracked and put into what's called the gas cost variance account, and that's to allow for that true up on what our rate is compared to what we're actually paying for it, and that factors into when we're coming forward with an adjustment. You have to look at what's called the gas cost variance account, whether or not we are owing money to customers or customers are owing money to us, to keep that at that no profit or margin to be made. So currently right now, the rate that we're charging is $4.20 a gigajoule, and the proposal and recommendation that we have is to lower that cost down to $3.30 a gigajoule. On the other end, that is reflected about 36% of your total residential customer bill. So that's that green portion. On the other side is what we call our delivery service rate, and that has two subcomponents to it. The one component is that basic monthly charge. That's a fixed cost that covers off the fixed cost, and it's a fixed charge that we charge customers on that. So that covers off things like the service line and meter reading costs, the customer account management, and right now we are currently charging a fixed fee of $24.50 per month, and the proposal is that we want to move that to $26.50 per month. And that is that sort of the darker colored blue portion of the bill, which is about 34% of your customer's bill, the residential customer. The last subcategory on the delivery service rate side is what we call the delivery charge. Now that is a different one. That's a variable rate that comes in. So the amount of gas that you use that flows through, it's a variable amount. So the more gas you use, there's a charge that goes to that. Now those charges are reflective of what we're paying for transportation, storage, distribution, and any of the maintenance that's being done at your residence. And so currently right now it's about 11 cents per cubic meter that we are charging, and the proposal is to go to 11.13 cents per cubic meter. So that's that variable amount. And when you look at the residential bill, that makes up that portion of about 30%. It's 30% of the residential bill. So that's the total bill. And again, this is just an example on the residential customer side. So a little bit of background on why we're here today and what has taken place. So back in July of 2022, we filed an application, and it was a comprehensive application to do an increase to commodity of about 31%. And the reason that was such a high increase was because back in 22, there was a big spike in natural gas costs that came forward. Again, we don't make any profit margin on the commodity portion, but that spike in prices really came from a number of factors. And if you recall, one of those factors was there's some geopolitical issues that took place in Europe, and that really increased the amount of demand for natural gas that was happening in the U.S. to go to the LNG plants in order to provide gas to Europe. That was one of the factors. There's a number of other factors, but that was one of the main, a big one that drove up those prices, and that's why we had to come forward with an application to increase the commodity. We also, at the same time, were facing the same cost pressures that businesses and everybody was facing here, increasing costs, inflationary costs. So we had to deal with an application for a delivery service rate. And at the time when we filed this back in July of 2022, we were looking at a 3-year delivery rate application, which would have been an 8% for the previous year, 5% for the 23-24 fiscal year, and then another 5% for the 24-25 fiscal year. So that was what the application was. And as I said, the reasons for those increases were because of the increasing prices of natural gas, but it was also to deal with not only the inflationary pieces, but some of the investment that we were doing in our system. We do for public safety reasons. We invest on the maintenance of our system, and some of those investments in there. There was also some costs that we're dealing with some of the energy efficiency programs that we were doing to help customers in helping them upgrade their equipment, and providing a rebates on that was an investment in there. General inflationary costs, and also some of the continued environment and social responsibilities were included in those costs that we're doing from SaskEnergy's perspective. So back in December, the panel had issued a recommendation to the minister in December of 2022, and the report covered off a number of matters that I've got up on there. And it was that 31% commodity rate increase was effective for August 1 of 2022, and the 8% increase on the delivery rates for that year, effective of August 1, 22, was to be maintained, and it has been. And the panel had issued in their report that 5% delivery rate increase that we had applied for the 2023-24 fiscal year and the 24-25 need to be considered once there was more financial forecast provided to the panel in 2023. And that's what we've brought forward now, is that financial update, and that's being considered in this recommendation that we have brought forward. So as indicated, we're asking for those to be considered. The volatility on the natural gas prices has changed since last year, and prices have now softened. So there's a few factors that come into that, and we'll get into that. Jason will talk a little bit about that, but they've settled in and have been decreased, and we actually recovered the gas cost variance account, and the panel is saying, as soon as that gas cost variance account gets recovered, to come back and look at that commodity again, and that's what we're doing right now. And that was paid off, that gas cost variance account amounts owing to SaskEnergy from customers has been collected now and been cleared out as of March 2023. So that's why we're now recommending a decrease on the commodity side. So the recommendation that we have brought forward that the panel is considering is that 5% increase to be effective on the delivery service rate for October 1, 2023. Again, doing for the rising costs that SaskEnergy is facing, and also for the economic conditions that we're currently having. Combined with that, we're looking at a commodity rate decrease from 13.04 cents per cubic meter, or $3.30 a gigajoule, to be effective from October 1, 2023. Again, that's going from a $4.20 a gigajoule to $3.30 a gigajoule. So again, that is because there's been a decline in the natural gas prices since that last increase we did, and we're trying to look at that gas cost variance account to maintain that within that $20 million threshold amount, which triggers applications. So without this change, the gas cost variance account would be forecasted to exceed that threshold by November of 2023. So that's why we brought forward in what consideration for this decrease. So what this will mean, and kind of have it on here, is that you're going to see generally an overall average rate reduction when you combine the two recommendations in natural gas bills of about 8.3% for customers. Now that's an average piece. So what I'll do now is I'm going to turn it over to the officials, and I'll call up Corey Fry here to get into that financial update on the delivery service rate application.
Probably need to adjust it a bit there. Yeah, that's good. Perfect. Okay, thank you, Mark. And first off, good afternoon to everybody that's joined us here in the room this afternoon, as well as to everyone joining us online and listening. As Mark said, my name is Corey Fry. I'm the Acting Executive Vice President in Corporate Planning. And I just wanted to discuss the delivery service rate financial update information that we had for you today. And in talking about this as an update, we had initially filed, as Mark had pointed out, we had initially filed our application around this time last year, and we're coming forward, continuing with this recommendation for a 5% increase, and brought forward as a as just an update to that initial application. So I wanted to highlight a few things for everyone as it relates to that update, and wanted to start off just with a bit of background in terms of the economic overview. Our initial application that was filed at this time of last year was done so at a time when we had rising natural gas prices coming from a fallout from the war in Ukraine, and that was among a number of different items that were all helping to drive inflation higher. And it was also at that beginning of that rise in the interest rate cycle that was that is intended to combat that inflation that we're all seeing. So in filing this update, while the market prices for natural gas and other commodities have stabilized, which is something that Jason will get into when he talks about our commodity rate decrease that we're also applying for, we're still seeing a growing economy driving inflation numbers higher than we've grown accustomed to in recent years. And we're also seeing interest rates going up to continue fighting that. We've seen interest rates have now doubled from a year ago, and they're up almost 5% from the beginning of last year. So that's the overview that we're kind of seeing as we're coming into this update in the application. As our application last year outlined, our financial requirements in providing delivery services are made up of a number of different items, be that transportation and storage of natural gas, taxes, as well as some offsetting miscellaneous revenues and fees just from some of our other services and charges outside of our standard delivery service. But in terms of providing an update on our requirements in year 2 and year 3 of that application, supporting our request, I really want to highlight and focus on these other 4 key components and the 5 factors that drive them. There are four items that are significant or contribute to our overall required revenue that we recoup through our rates. And so those being operating and maintenance costs, depreciation, interest expense, and our net earnings. So I'll speak just briefly to each one. First off, labor costs. Within our operating and maintenance costs, labor costs is the source of the largest change in our costs from the previous year, but also it is the largest change when updating our forecast this year compared to our initial application. The most significant item behind that increase certainly is rising wages and salaries from existing staff. As noted in the economic background, the impacts of inflation have been significant, which leads to a need to keep pace in order to retain the staff necessary to continue providing the safe and reliable delivery service that our organization provides to our customers. Speaking specifically, the organization's collective bargaining agreement has expired earlier this year, and we're certainly in the midst of negotiations, and that is something that addresses definitely a significant component to this. But in addition to those costs related to existing staff, that explains about 65% of the total increase in our labor costs, and the remainder is really attributed to a growing staff complement just in a few key areas that really support the organization's overall strategy, namely within a couple of areas of our customer service operations division, as well as within our digital technology and security group. Within our customer service operations division, we've identified a need for additional staff in our operational effectiveness team, as well as our customer experience team. Operational effectiveness as a group is really designed with a goal of identifying some longer-term savings and reallocation of our existing resources, but most importantly, they're focused on implementing the changes necessary for those savings to be realized. This group is tasked with employing a data-driven operating approach, utilizing reviews of key performance indicators, supporting decision-making, and enabling agile continuous improvement. The other significant or the other area of growing staff complement within our customer service operations is within customer experience. As an organization, SaskEnergy recognizes the increased customer expectations related to ease of service and interaction for customers. SaskEnergy's developed a customer experience team to take on the opportunities to deliver a modern customer service expectation, meet that level, but also to provide a platform to more efficiently serve those customers. Staff additions in this area are focused on a number of priorities, whether it's modernizing our customer contact center, developing mobile application to improve account access for customers and users, and building out additional self-service options associated with our new online customer portal, which we recently launched late last year, including opening up functionality for things like online appointment booking and enhanced options for account management, assisting property owners and their tenants. The other area of increased labor costs as a result of additional staffing is within our digital technology and security group. Employing the data-driven decision-making needed for the success of the operational effectiveness team and delivering on the enhanced online and self-service customer experience expectations requires support from our digital technology and security division. Staff additions in that area are focused on delivering an organizational data strategy, supporting the efficient collection, management, and provision of data that the entire business can utilize and supporting effective decision-making. They're also focused on priorities supporting modernizing systems in a number of different areas, all centered on making processes within our organization more effective and efficient, delivering service to our customers. Beyond labor costs, the other key driver that we have noted in our operating and maintenance spending is on our energy efficiency programs, and that makes up the bulk of the costs within which we call our public relations spending category. While SaskEnergy is certainly focused on reducing our own operational emissions by 35% through a developed roadmap of projects which were outlined in our original application, we're also focused on providing cost-effective assistance to our customers to help them with their own emissions reduction goals. Historically, spending on energy efficiency programs within the province has, I would say, rather significantly trailed other Canadian provinces. And while our forecasted spending increases here aren't intended to fully close that gap, they are going to be targeted at assisting our customers to increase their end-use efficiency and ultimately just to reduce their emissions. SaskEnergy is working with a consultant to identify areas with potential high impact for customer efficiency programs, which will then lead to specific program design and a delivery structure that supports program measurement and monitoring for effectiveness. Some anticipated areas of program focus within our customer segments include updating our residential and commercial equipment replacement programs, supporting First Nations residents with energy efficiency, and working with home builders as they expand options for higher efficiency and performance homes. So outside of the ongoing charges to operate and maintain our assets, we also have the purchase cost of our assets, which is recognized on a steady yearly basis through our depreciation expense. And that's also another item that factors into our revenue requirement. These expenses are meant to approximate the value of using our assets for the year and is based as a function of both our costs to acquire them and their average useful life. We regularly undertake, as a matter of best practice, a study of our practices and assumptions in this area. And following last year, having a third-party study completed, the organization identified that we needed to reduce the estimated useful life of some of our computer information assets in order to more accurately reflect their value. This resulted in an increase in the amount expensed last year and a much more moderate increase for the current and future years. However, on an overall basis, our total cost from depreciation was not significantly changed. There were a number of small changes to other asset classes that balanced that off. Just wanted to point that piece out, although it's not a significant change, there certainly was within the application for those that reviewed. The next category around interest expense, drawing back to the opening remarks regarding the rise in interest rates, we've seen a significant increase in the interest charges on our short-term debt that we hold to finance our day-to-day operations of the organization. Mirroring the change in the Bank of Canada's key interest rate, our average short-term borrowing rate has certainly risen over the last 2 years. It's risen by about 4% in the last few years, 3% of which has come just in the last 12 months alone, so since we filed that our initial application. Efforts to manage this are underway throughout the organization, include adjusting our split between our short and long-term debt. But as we move from a period of low interest rates, the expectation for increased interest costs is something for our organization to face, as well as all borrowers throughout the economy are facing the same thing. So that brings us to the last key driver related to our rate request. And as part of standard utility rate setting principles, we include our expected net earnings along with all of our other costs when we determine our total revenue requirement. This revenue requirement is then spread over our different customer classes, used to determine what our rates need to be set at in order to recover our costs and earn that targeted return. In line with other similar gas utilities across the country, our long-term target return percentage remains at 8.3%. However, within this application, our request for an increase has been done factoring in an expectation of a return that's substantially lower at a rate of just below 3%. So we reference the high inflation that we're seeing in costs, and we understand that those same pressures are also being faced by our customers. Targeting a return of 8.3% would require a rate increase of over 3 times of what our current application request is for. In recognition of this, the acceptance of a lower return has a significant impact on reducing our revenue requirement and subsequently keeping our request to a 5% increase this year. The lower short-term return projected for 23-24 is manageable on a temporary basis and will allow us to maintain our key financial health ratios within an acceptable range to continue providing our delivery service to our utility customers. So in terms of looking at our rates, in demonstrating the need for a 5% delivery rate increase, we've so far focused on the year-to-year change in our costs, which is important. It's really an obvious comparison for everyone to make, as well as our customers. Typically looking back at what you paid last period is an important mechanism and something that everyone does. But another important comparison for ourselves as an organization is to consider how the cost of our service compares to our peers in other Canadian jurisdictions. And as in his opening remarks, Mark pointed out some of the differences that exist between our organization in providing our service, as well as some of our peers. So while there's not a perfect comparison, it is informative to understand our position and how we measure up. And as you can see, for the average residential customer, we are among the lowest in terms of annual delivery service cost, both before and after our proposed 5% increase. While not as low as our neighbors to the east in Manitoba, our service cost remains lower than our peers in Alberta, which is a jurisdiction that we look at having a much more similar average utilization in terms of natural gas for residential heating demand. And especially if you look at that, as Mark had pointed out, in terms of the size of our service area and the comparison between ourselves and utilities within Alberta and different jurisdictions, we certainly compare quite favorably in that manner. So the final topic I wanted to leave you with before handing it over to Jason to discuss our application for a commodity rate decrease is just to look at our rate schedule by customer class and the impact from changes from them. As you can see, in requesting an overall 5% delivery rate increase, we're looking to increase both components of our delivery charge that Mark spoke about in his introduction, the basic monthly charge, as well as the per unit delivery charge. Summarizing the changes to these items, you can see the 5% increase has been averaged across each of the rate classes and how these changes are expected to play out for an average customer on a monthly basis. The higher use classes, including large commercial and small industrial customers, will see more of their increase coming from their use, while the lowest use class in the residential category certainly will be much more impacted just by the increase in the basic monthly charge. With that, I'll turn it over to Jason, who will provide details on our application for a commodity rate decrease and overall bill impacts for both proposed changes before we open things up for questions this afternoon.
Thanks, Corey. Good afternoon, everyone. So as Mark mentioned, the commodity rate is set just to recoup the cost of getting gas to users in the province. It's a pass-through. There is no markup. There is no income earned on it. Last year, we applied for a rate increase. There was a number of factors affecting that, namely the price of gas had spiked, and we had a GCVA balance owing from customers to SaskEnergy. The gas cost variance account, as Mark mentioned, tracks the difference between what we pay for gas and what we earn on through the commodity rate, and it's refunded or collected from customers with each rate application. We're currently proposing a decrease from $4.20 per gigajoule to $3.30 per gigajoule, and I'll explain the factors that go into that decision a little bit further as we go along here. So start with the market update. You can see from this chart that while we have periods of relative stability, the prices for natural gas, like any commodity, can spike suddenly and sharply. Last year, we did see a confluence of factors that led to a price spike, and it was namely the war in Ukraine. But there are other factors as well. ESG efforts have been ramped up to move from coal to natural gas as a cleaner source of energy. Since last year, we've seen prices decline. We had a warmer than normal winter, and that helped storage levels elevate. And so we're able to provide or apply for a commodity rate decrease. So the commodity rate that we charge isn't simply based on the price of gas. There are other factors included. We get most of our gas, 90% of our base load, from Alberta, so there's transportation costs included in that as well. And then there's some premiums that we pay to get gas to the market. So it's not simply just the price of gas that goes into our commodity rate. We use a price risk management strategy at SaskEnergy to help provide rate stability. We've heard from customers that they like to know what their bill is going to be roughly. So we do our best to provide that stability. One of our objectives, though, is also to make sure that we're competitive with other Canadian utilities as well. You can see from this chart that we are among the lowest in the country, and if we were to achieve a commodity rate of 3.30, that would put us amongst the lowest. We do have comparators here. Now, this is as of July 1st. I will caution that Alberta tends to set rates more frequently, so that the price that you see for Alberta, for Edmonton and Calgary, is reflective of summer gas prices. So they will be lower than they will be throughout the rest of the year. So as far as the commodity bill goes, this decrease that we're proposing will lower the average residential bill by 9.4%. And residential customers being the lowest use customers, the average decrease goes up from there. So as far as the total bill impact, so Mark mentioned that we're applying for a delivery rate increase and a commodity rate decrease. This will result in an overall bill decrease for customers across rate classes, ranging from 6.7 for residential customers to 15.9% decrease for our small industrial customers. I want to speak a little bit about the trending that we've seen in our gas bills. So this is the average annual gas bill for residential customers. You can see that there's some fluctuations, largely dependent on the natural gas market. Once we factor in non-SaskEnergy charges, such as the carbon tax, it does change the picture a little bit. You can see in more recent years, the fluctuations have really been more of a trend upward. And you can see that the purple part of that bar being the commodity tax, that's an ever-increasing cost that's applied to the SaskEnergy bill or collected through SaskEnergy. So to evaluate competitiveness across other jurisdictions, we like to look back at the previous 12 months because there are differences in the how frequent commodity rates are set in jurisdictions. It's the best comparative that we have. And you can see over the last 12 months as of July, so not factoring in the rate decrease that we're applying for, that Saskatchewan residents had the lowest gas bill in the country. So that concludes the formal part of the presentation. At this point, I'll open the floor up to any questions. I'll turn it over to you.
It appears there's no questions. I will just say a few words about the panel's role and how this public meeting and so on will be used by the panel. The panel is directed by an order of the minister in charge of the Crown Investments Corporation and SaskEnergy to do a review of the rate application put forward by SaskEnergy. Although there are several terms in this document, basically we are to provide the minister an opinion, our opinion, on the fairness of the proposed rate application under a number of criteria, including the interests of SaskEnergy, the interests of the public, and the customers. We must also consider the relevant industry standards, as well as the proposed rates' competitiveness with neighboring jurisdictions. Part of our mandate is to seek input from the public and from stakeholders in general. We have done so by asking the public to comment through our website, through emails, or by phone messages. Our plan is to complete our review, taking into account all the responses as well as presentations today and any further communications that we may receive. There's still an opportunity for stakeholders to provide their views to the panel. We will be working with our consultant over the next month and a half or so to come up with our report to the minister with a final deadline slated to be August 30th. In the meantime, you can go to our website, which is saskratereview.ca, to monitor all of the information that is provided and the questions and answers that SaskEnergy has provided, and any other documents and so on related to this. We will also be posting this meeting to our website. With that, I'd like to thank Mark, Corey, and Jason for their presentations on the SaskEnergy application, as well as the folks out there who are watching. And we will be, as I say, reporting August 30th, so you can watch for that. And then ultimately the minister's decision on what the rates that will be applied come October 1st. Thank you.